why do we have an ego? Um, well, I mean, I just want to ask a further question: that who is it that wants to know? Um, until you know that, there's no one to ask any questions, especially a question about themselves. Um, or maybe it's in the act of asking the question that the self is created. Um, but of course, we create uh, selves by asking questions, and in the act of asking it, lose ourselves. We become committed to a certain way of investigating the world. Um, when we try to grasp an idea or an object in the world, we don't know it immediately. We often have to engage it, interact with it before we really come to gain an understanding of what it is, how it behaves, um, and even if it's a person or maybe a dog or pet, how it intends. We begin to take a perspective outside of ourselves within someone else, or we are able within ourselves to take their perspective. Um, and this can be shown neurologically, empirically, um, through various mirror neuron systems that allow us to automatically, internally mimic the experience of the others that we interact with, not just humans. Um, when we watch a bird spread its wings and fly, we have an evolutionary uh, mimic or mimicry of this within our own structure, within our own genetic inheritance, and so we can feel that. Not exactly like the eagle or the hawk that's flying, but we can put ourselves at least part way into that perspective, into that animal, and feel its body in our own bodies. So there is such a thing as identity, but when we ask for our own identity, or when we start to take the I think, the thinker, and the idea, the knowledge or the objects too seriously, when you start to reify them, when you start to think they are what's real independently, and then all of a sudden subject and object are separate, and uh, you know we run into all these problems afterward. If you can avoid reifying the I and the world, or if you can avoid um, talking an ego into existence, then life may become more simple, as you said, or maybe it's not that complexity disappears, because you were saying that it's complexity that's the problem, or at least our thinking it's complex, but reality is complex. And sometimes when I try to think about it, when I try to know reality in a dualistic way like that as an object, um, I end up uh, confused. I end up um, ending in a paradox of some kind. Um, and that's why the ego suffers, because it's always confused. But it's not because of complexity. Complexity is beautiful, it's harmonious, it implies an ordered whole or a unified system. And I mean, what is reality but a unified system? But again, not the kind of system that we could know from the outside. We are that system. So, when Buddha talks about emptiness or um, non-self, um, he's of course referring to a self. He's saying, okay, you usually think there's a self, so there's something that appears to be self-like, but it's not real. And even that is empty. It's supposed to be a completion of um, a realization in that statement that can't be completely contained by the statement. Because Buddha is saying more than there's this appearance of self and it's not real. He also wants you to become aware of the possibility of not asking that particular question. Because again, it's the question of why we have an ego that creates it. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't ask it, because you know, we want to talk to each other, so we tell stories, and it's okay when we take the story seriously, so long as we know it's a story. But when we start mistaking our words and ideas as actually existing, then we end up in trouble. And I think the current economic crisis, where all of these pieces of paper were being stored in banks, and just really, it was not even paper, it was digits and computer systems, and they're all sort of attached to deals that were made at some point somewhere by somebody, but nobody really knows what the material value underlying these numbers was. So our ideas have completely lost touch with the reality of our day-to-day interactions with each other, with the food that we eat, and the energy that we use, and so forth. We've become so mesmerized by our ideas about the world and by what we think they do for our own individual selves, that we've completely destroyed everything. Because reality itself is it's emptiness, which is to say that there are no separate pieces. There is an appearance of manyness, but all the individual forms are empty of their own inherent identity. Their identity is a reflection of all the other identities around them. There's nothing essential and distinct. Certainly each one is unique, but its uniqueness arises from the community it's involved within. And it's weird that the human being would ever get into this mess of actually being, I think, the only creature, at least on this planet, that has come to think about itself and about a world that it could know. That's a lot in that simple statement. That the human being had to achieve this fixed center of knowing or consciousness, opposed to this natural realm of objects and things. That's pretty sophisticated. And what is it? I wouldn't say that this exists because it's evolutionarily advantageous, because I don't think animals have this ego thing. They don't have an I think, a cogito, a cogito, as Descartes said. This is why he said they don't have a soul. It's really, he wasn't talking about that principle that animates them, that forces us to recognize that they are alive and that they have an inner life, an inner experience of their own. Descartes was talking about something else, something peculiarly human, this intellect that speaks a supposedly rational, logical language, such that it can know itself rationally and the world empirically through description. That's what Descartes was saying the animals don't have, and certainly whatever this is that we human beings are doing, it seems to confuse us and to separate us from nature. And I think when Buddha criticized, the thousands of years of Hindu scripture, like the Vedas and the Upanishads and so forth, what he was doing was allowing us to step outside of the thoughts that had become so reified into our actual experience, again, which is not egoic. It's not. It includes the words that we speak and the ideas that we have, but it is not reducible to them. It extends beyond them. It gives rise to them. So yeah, anyways, thanks for your video and the question. I enjoyed attempting to answer.